Headlines now warn of World War III. Those words are a chilling echo from the Cold War. Today, they're being whispered again. Russia's leaders now warn that creating a NATO-enforced no-fly zone over Ukraine could spark exactly that. A global war. In recent statements, Dmitry Medvedev, Russia's deputy security chief and former president, has been blunt. He says any NATO no-fly zone in Ukraine would amount to a declaration of war. He even wrote that such a move will mean only one thing: a war between NATO and Russia. In short, officials warn a no-fly zone is not a minor step but an open declaration of conflict. The Kremlin insists NATO is already de facto involved by arming Ukraine, so from Moscow's view, this would be the last straw. These threats did not appear in a vacuum. They tap into decades of NATO-Russia tension. After the Soviet collapse, Russian leaders felt NATO expansion betrayed old assurances. Indeed, Kremlin sources note Western powers promised not to expand NATO into the former Soviet bloc, a pledge Russia says was broken. In 2008, when NATO talked about admitting Ukraine, Putin warned it would be a hostile act toward Russia. Within months, Russia was fighting a brief war in Georgia. This history fuels today's fears. The current standoff also echoes the most perilous Cold War moments. In fact, one recent analysis calls this the gravest confrontation since the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, the flashpoint that nearly triggered nuclear Armageddon. The Cuban Missile Crisis brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. Its memory now hangs over every escalation in Europe. On paper, a no-fly zone sounds passive, just a line in the sky. In reality, it means NATO jets would have to shoot down any violators. That spells direct combat. NATO commanders have openly warned that enforcing a no-fly zone could place NATO forces in direct combat with Russian air assets, risking escalation to a broader conflict. In other words, NATO could be drawn into a full-scale war with Moscow, and make no mistake, this crisis is now nuclearized. President Putin has moved to dramatically lower the threshold for nuclear use. In late 2024, he declared that any conventional attack on Russia backed by a nuclear power could be treated as a nuclear assault. In August 2022, after Ukraine's counteroffensive, Putin even threatened to use nuclear weapons to defend Russia's territory. These are not idle threats. Any clash in the skies risks provoking a nuclear response. The broader risk is chilling. One analyst emphasizes that this war is already the gravest confrontation since the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. To answer that risk, NATO has deployed jets and air defenses to Eastern Europe under Operation Eastern Sentry. But that show of force only underscores how tense the situation is. Each patrol flown, each interceptor locked on a target, brings the world closer to the edge. Throughout this standoff, Western leaders have been painfully aware of the dangers. They have avoided any action which could, in the extreme, pose a nuclear threat. That is why, despite strong support for Ukraine, NATO has stopped short of direct military engagement in the war. But the warnings from Moscow underline how fragile the balance remains. The world now stands at a crossroads. These debates in distant capitals translate into real danger for ordinary people everywhere. Every jet scrambled and every missile launched could tip the balance. Will diplomacy and restraint hold off a no-fly zone, or will one misstep make this the war to end all wars? The question looms over us all. In the end, history will remember whether 2025 was the year the world averted catastrophe, or the year brinkmanship pushed everyone over the edge. The warnings are clear, the stakes enormous. The only safe path now is calm judgment and restraint. Anything else could lead to consequences none of us can bear. Sources: based on recent news reports and analysis, economictimes.indiatimes.com, cfr.org, reuters.com.